Well, it's not 7, but that was a holy pause, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Carissa Baldwin McGinnis. I'm a priest that serves the Diocese of Texas in Houston, and a very grateful graduate of the Seminary of the Southwest. Yes, as Charlie Cook would say, right after the cooling of the Earth's crust, I graduated. MDiv 07. So, I want to welcome all of you. We're different graduation streams. We're different years of class. We're different ministries. We're probably all kinds of differences here. But tonight, this is our place. So I invite you to be at peace, be at rest, and be at home. Before I invite Cynthia to come up, I do want to tell you that this offering is usually billed as an alumni offering to the alumni of the seminary. The truth is it takes a village to make this happen. I really want to thank Jo Roberts Craig, who's a sister of the cloth, for leading the committee work on this. I don't know if you were the chief cat herder or just the chief cat, but I know you were the chief. Mm-hmm.
The cats would not hurt.
Yes. So we've been at this, I have two rounds now, and what I know is there's always major staff angels and undergirding, and so I want to especially thank Alicia Brannon for her time and effort to really help all of us build back up. You know, COVID took some things from humanity. We're trying to build the event back up. And so I want to thank you for your support, and also Kay Warren. Probably Chief Administrative Officer of these Blandy lectures. Alumni, friends, faculty, students, all the staff of the seminary who are great hosts to us who spent the day here, I want to thank you. And to all of our friends who are with us tonight virtually, be welcome. We're so thrilled that for the first time we get to partner with the Iona Collaborative on our Day of Learning and Prayer. So really want to express gratitude on behalf of the alumni to the Iona Collaborative. So maybe for about the 4th time today, I would like to introduce you, Dean Kittredge, Cynthia Briggs Kittredge, to welcome our guest speaker this night.
Thank you very much, Carissa, for convening the Alumni Steering Committee, overseeing this event, and thank you, Joe Craig, and thank you, the Iona Collaborative. And it's thrilling to be able to welcome so many neighbors and friends to this event. It's great for you to join our alumni and bringing together many people who love this work of poetry and prayer. I'm thrilled that Naomi Shihab is our Blandy lecturer tonight. She is an award-winning Palestinian-American poet, essayist, and educator. Seminary of the Southwest, we've wanted to have her here for a very long time, and we're delighted that she's this year's Blandy lecturer. She is going to speak on the subject of beloved community. And before I invite her up, I want to say how I've reflected on the kinship of poetry and worship for a long time. Poetry makes us pause, she says, and this quality of noticing and attention is also part of the contemplative disciplines of prayer. She attends to the infinite value of the ordinary, much like those of us who celebrate sacraments do as well. And finally, in a time of trauma and violence, poetry is not less relevant, but all the more significant. And so I'm so grateful that Naomi Shihab will be speaking to us tonight. Welcome. After the lecture itself, Scott Bader-Say and Naomi will have a conversation and have questions from the audience.
you. You are a beloved community. I felt that the moment I got out of my car. It's palpable on this campus. I felt welcome in the air. And speaking to some of you at the reception, hearing about your beautiful days, I was lucky to meet Joe, main cat here, right at the top. I could feel what a wonderful day you have had, and it just made me feel heartened in the world to know that such good work and such care is still present. If you spent all your time watching news these days, you might feel it had left us forever, and you might also feel really, really tired and really, really sad. So it means a lot to me to be invited here. My husband sent me off with his words, "Don't forget that's my favorite place I've ever spoken." And I'm not even sure what year he was here or exactly what he spoke about, but he loved it, and he loved the people who were here. And I just feel it. I can understand why. I want to thank you before I say anything for all the work you do in the world, because just meeting you and talking to you about your different places you come from and the different devotions you have in your communities, I see that your work is so important, and I can feel how many people it touches. And for a poet to get to speak to you feels like a very lucky thing indeed. Poets are made extremely anxious by the word lecture. So I just think of these like little mini things I say between poems as like being little mini lectures of small insects or something. I don't know, just little tiny things. But I hope you will accept some talking about poetry as being its own kind of lecture. And I want to welcome two of my favorite poets who live in Austin, Jack Brannon and Bob Ayers, who are here. I've known them both for so many years. I love their work. And Jack is the founder of the festival at Round Top Poetry Festival, which is truly one of the great poetry festivals in the world. And I can say that having been there like 20 times and been to a lot of other ones too. But Round Top, Texas, as you know, is a very tiny community, but when poetry is happening there, something truly magical comes into presence. And Jack started it all long ago, so thank you. And Bob Ayers, thank you for your care for the land, which seems more and more important every day, and for poetry as well. And also, Molly Nolke, where are you? Will you raise? Molly, right here. Now, are you part of this community officially, or you just came to be my friend? Or, I mean, both. Okay, both. Okay. Well, Molly's father, Mont Nolke, will remain in my memory as one of the true champions of poetry that I've ever met in 50 years next year of working around the state of Texas. Because he asked me, and he's the only person who's ever asked me something like this, to come to the town of, what's the town? Mertzen, Texas, and just go to the high school and work with everybody, but don't tell them who sent me. I said, well, I can't do that. They won't let me in. I mean, why would they accept me? They're not going to give me their students. And Mont said, well, I just don't want them thanking me. He didn't like a lot of attention on himself and gratitude. He was an incredible writer, an incredible rancher and human. I just fell madly in love with him for the last years of his life and feel so lucky to have met him as a champion of what expression means to young people in a small community. And it was amazing what happened that day. I mean, we finally did get Mont to stand up to this invitation. And I went, and those students were full of poetry, and they had so much to say, and I'll always thank him for his spirit of wanting to bring poets there. Yesterday I went to a talk at Trinity University where I was a religion major a long time ago with someone else who's here. Yay, Trinity grad. And I went to see where the religion offices are now because there's a new building they're in. And it just felt so good to walk around on that campus. But I was there to hear another Trinity grad speak about her forthcoming book called Wishbone, An American Odyssey in Asia. Dr. Carol Fulbray, who traveled to Asia, especially India, China, Tibet, and Thailand, and Nepal, in the early 80s. And she and her then new husband went traveling, planning to be gone 2 months, and they ended up being gone 18 months and living with families in all the communities they traveled to. And she's also an artist, so it's a beautiful book coming out, again called Wishbone. That'll be out, I think, in February. But the very last line of Carol's talk was this line: when we are reckless with people's lives, we destroy our own humanity. When we are reckless with people's lives, we destroy our own humanity. And I wrote that line down to bring here tonight because I feel that it connects to what is happening in the world right now. Many people have been reckless with many other people's lives. And poetry tries to encourage us to do exactly the opposite, to be attentive to other people's lives, to listen to other people's lives, to care about them. And so does spiritual practice and spiritual teaching. Who are we living with? Who are we identifying as any kind of other? How can we make a bridge? How can we connect to that person? I mean, I have felt since I was a small child walking to school in Ferguson, Missouri, my first home place, when my mother would send me off every day with the phrase, "Be your best self." She wasn't talking about poetry. She was just talking about behavior. That I was called to try to be a little better than I would be otherwise. And luckily I found out quickly that poetry helped you do that. Because when you read a poem, you had a window, an insight into someone else's life. And when you wrote a poem, you paid attention. And you cared. And you noticed. And you worked on language, which felt to me already like the tool we have as human beings to help us be together. So I just like to read two things from other people as starters. I brought with me a beloved book by my favorite poet in the whole world since I was 16 years old. He died more than 20 years ago, William Stafford. But this book was called Every War Has Two Losers. William Stafford on Peace and War. And it was edited with an introduction by his son, who will be coming to Round Top, Texas this coming spring. William Stafford was a conscientious objector. He was a peace activist, and he talked about topics of care and community all of his life. And he didn't publish his first book. I just think this is interesting for some people to hear, till he was 43. And he thought that was time enough. And then he went on to publish many, many other books. Watching the Jet Planes Dive by William Stafford. We must go back and find a trail on the ground, back of the forest and mountain on the slow land. We must begin to circle on the intricate sod. By such wild beginnings, without help, we may find the small trail on through the buffalo bean vines. We must go back with noses in the palms of our hands and climb over the map in far places, everywhere, and lie down wherever there is doubt and sleep there. If roads are unconnected, we must make a path, no matter how far it is or how lowly we arrive. We must find something forgotten by everyone alive and make some fabulous gesture when the sun goes down, as they do by custom in little Mexican towns where they crawl for some ritual up a rocky steep. The jet planes dive. We must travel on our knees. William Stafford. I cannot urge you all to look him up with enough encouragement. I really think if you don't know William Stafford's work, you'll find something in it that you want to know. There's a complete digital library of his poems and other writings of his, notebooks and random comments, through the Lewis and Clark College Library, free. You can just go on there and read anything he ever wrote or published. You don't even have to buy a book now. But that is where his archive is. And to me, William Stafford is a poet who lets us look through time, who is always calling on us to be our best selves, who tried very hard in his own life to encourage others to have confidence to speak, and who wrote a poem every day. He never stopped writing. There is something new that is going to happen starting on his birthday in January 17th in his memory for 1 year, and it's called the Stafford Challenge. And if anyone wants to join it, it's open to all, and it'll just be a shared collective around the world of people writing poems every day and gathering once a month with a guest poet and sharing your work when you want to. And I think it's going to be pretty great. So if any of you want to join in, please come. Just look up the Stafford Challenge. And one other poem by a poet I don't know. She lives in Colorado. Her name is Veronica Patterson. A Charm Against the Language of Politics. Say over and over the names of things, the clean nouns, weeping birch, bloodstone, tanager, banshee, damask, rose. Read field guides, atlases, gravestones. At the store, bless each apple by kind. Macintosh, winesap, delicious, Jonathan. Enunciate the vegetables and herbs, okra, calendula. Go deeper into the terms of some small landscape, spiders, for example. Then, after a speech on compromising the environment for technology, recite the tough, silky structure of webs. Tropical stick, ladder web, mesh web, filmy dome, funnel, trapdoor. When you have compared the candidates, slippery platforms, chant the spiders, comb-footed, round-headed, garden cross, feather-legged, ogre-faced, black widow. Remember that most short verbs are ethical. Hatch, grow, spin, trap, eat. Dig deep, pronounce clearly, pull the words in over your head. Hole up for the duration. Isn't that a great poem? Again, it's called A Charm Against the Language of Politics by Veronica Patterson. So, hearing poems like that, it doesn't take long to me when I hear a poem or read a poem, whether it's a poem I've read many times, like the Stafford poem, or the Veronica Patterson one, which I just found for the first time about 2 weeks ago. I feel refreshed, bathed, as if the language has cleansed me of all the flashing internet stories that I didn't read. As if it has come in to slow me down, slow us down, to call us to attention, to bid us love things again, love language again. I had never thought about short one-syllable words being ethical, but it feels like they are. I have thought a lot about the language of children and how it is ethical in its own exquisite way. And that is why, after telling the Texas Commission on the Arts right down the street that I would visit schools in Texas for 2 years, I've now done it for 50. But it's because those voices of children would not let me go. They were there, they were real, they were honest, and just randomly I brought a page of some things I wrote down when our grandson was 4, and he didn't read yet. These are just a few things he said all in one afternoon. My mother was with us. She was 93 at the time. I want to be 93. I want to catch up to everybody. Let's pretend I'm 6. I don't want to be 4. We dig up an old rusty nail that's so old it must have come from a church. Mosquitoes. It's okay if mosquitoes bite me. They're my friends. It's my life. Okay. I think he's changed his mind about mosquitoes, but I've never gotten tired of the voices of children. I write them down in airports. When I hear a child say something wonderful, I'll just say, what gate it was, what the child said. Children are encountering, using, being with language in this fresh and wonderful way. And I think we can all be restored whenever we have an opportunity to listen to them. I used to say to high school students when they would act sort of humdrum about language or words, you need to babysit. You need to go be with some younger kids. You've been with high school too long. Let's get fresh again. And I can say now, making dramatic statements, after you do something for half a century, you can be dramatic. Never once have I visited a town where poetry didn't live or want to live more. Never once have I met a group of people of any age in even the hardest place where poetry wasn't present. It was always present. Maximum security prisons, juvenile detention, the wild gang at lunchtime. It was always present. And it always wanted to be spoken. So that's why I've done this so long. So I'll just share a few poems that really feel like they want to come tonight in this time of sorrow and so much hardship in the world. At Texas State, I don't know if any of you know this, we have so many fabulous students from Africa now. 6 years ago, I don't think we did, but I don't know what kind of initiative has brought us so many wonderful voices. But some of my best poets in the last 6 years have been from Africa, different countries. And this has a quote at the top from Mali. No matter how far the town, there is another beyond it. Elsewhere. We're calling out to the far towns, hoping you're finding enough food. Hope your bowls are filled with fruit. Hope the night air cups your dwelling gently. Did we ever think of you enough, far towns? Were we able to imagine your rivers, light lifting your leaves? Did you sometimes feel the world forgot you? You were the world as much as we were. This is called The Road Between San Antonio and Comstock, Texas. And I think during the worst of the COVID lockdown times, many of us cleaned out our drawers and boxes in our closets. And that's where I found the letter that's in this poem. I think of it as a bloodline, clean thread stretching west, the mind emptying so gently as it ranged farther from billboards, chains, farther from access roads, exits, deeper into sky. That road is why I love this state, despite politics, pronouncements. The boy called Cody in Comstock, who wrote me a year after I visited his class. Basically, poetry changed everything. It made me see where I was. Could you please come back and stay forever? Finding his letter again, 30 years later, looking him up to learn he died young. A cowboy hat over his downturned face. I want to say, your roads are still stretching outwards, the fields you walked through. We are here, soaking in the mystery of time, trapped in our little houses, scared of a virus, feeling connected through the spaces, all of these new ways. And I remember you. Sometimes I think that's what people need in the world, to know they're remembered, to know they're thought about. This morning I received an email from a friend of mine in Gaza. Her name is Yeed Hissi, and she ran a literacy program for kids for 10 years. And I was Zooming with her kids regularly, and she just told what's happening in her life right now. And she also had 2 little sound tapes. She always encouraged her kids to go out into the community and tape things, and then try to think of a story from an overheard sentence. And the 2 things that she shared after her letter just describing her current circumstance, which is very grave and scary, were, we hope everybody knows that we weren't part of Hamas. We were teachers. We love kids. We just live here. We were born here. And the sound tapes were one of rain falling and one of bombs falling within the same message. That is so intense when you wake up and that's the first message you read. And she says, just tell people, we didn't want to do any terrible things to other human beings. We would never do that. The vast majority, 80% of the population of Gaza, did not approve of Hamas. It's like if you have a political party and you don't approve of what they're doing, we didn't either. We didn't get to say that publicly, but just make sure that people know that. And please let them know that we care about everybody. So one poem of mine that's been making the rounds a lot, not because of me, but other people send it out, is a poem called Before I Was a Gazan. And I wrote this years ago. It wasn't a new poem now. And it was another time in which there was a lot of bombing in Gaza. And if you really feel you don't know anything about Gaza, or you never went there and you can't picture it or anything, it was so poor, but it was still beautiful. People made their homes beautiful, and they planted little gardens, and they were a little obsessed with cats, kittens, a lot of kittens everywhere, kitten beds everywhere. So I want to read you just 2 connecting to Gaza, but they're to children. Children are not in political parties. Cross the sea. A girl in Gaza speaks into a table microphone. Do you believe in infinity? If so, what does it look like to you? And by the way, all the kids there speak English. Not like a wall, not like a soldier with a gun, not like a ruined house bombed out of being, not like concrete wreckage of a school's good hope, a clinic's best dream. In fact, not like anything imposed upon you and your family thus far in your precious 13 years. My infinity would be the never-ending light you deserve, every road opening up in front of you. Soberly, she nods her head. In our time, voices cross the sea easily, but sense is still difficult to come by. Next girl's question. Were you ever shy? When you work with kids, you know that kids are just kids everywhere. And I'm not finding Before I Was a Gazan. Oh, here it is. So this is years ago. But this poem is having its own life right now. Before I was a Gazan, I was a boy. And my homework was missing. Paper with numbers on it, stacked and lined. I was looking for my piece of paper, proud of this plus that, then multiplied. Not remembering if I had left it on the table after showing to my uncle or the shelf after combing my hair. But it was still somewhere, and I was going to find it and turn it in. Make my teacher happy. Make her say my name to the whole class before everything got subtracted. In a minute, even my uncle, even my teacher, even the best math student and his baby sister who couldn't talk yet. And now I would do anything for a problem. I could solve. Now, it has always been extremely important to me, as a half Palestinian person, to read Jewish writers. And I always have, and I always will, and I love them very much. And in fact, I would have to say right now, they're just as traumatized as I am, if not worse. And so I'll just read this for them. And we've always said, all of us, we just need to do everything together. And, you know, the politicians don't want to, but they should go, like, to some island or something and then just fight with each other, because the people just would rather do everything together. And one thing that I've been so sad about in this last terrible month is there were so many projects of integration among peoples, seeds of peace. My parents were very involved with them. I've been very involved with them. Nevi Shalom, Wahat El Salam, the village that is half and half, Arab and Jewish. What are they doing today? The hand-in-hand schools, incredible. So many projects. The symphony, half Palestinian, half Israeli musicians. I mean, just, you could go on and on. The circus. There's a circus of half and half participants. All these people have been betrayed because all their work was saying, we're like each other. We want to be friends. We've always wanted to be friends. Who is making these divisions? Who is setting one group up above another group? Who is saying chosen and unchosen? Well, we would not like to. We would like to say it together. So I've written a lot of things about that over the years. And anyway, I don't mean to go on and on about it, but I just think it's very important for people to think about and to know that there were so many good efforts that have been betrayed by all of this. So I'll just read this one. Before you can, my Jewish friends are kind and gentle. Not one of them would harm another person, even if they didn't know that person. My Arab friends are kind and gentle. Not one of them would harm another person, even if they didn't know that person. They might press you to drink 45 small cups of coffee or tea, but that would be all. My Jewish friends have never taken my house, my land, herded me into a cell, tortured me, cut down my trees, never once. My Arab friends have never built a bomb. We respect each other as equals. We look somewhat alike. We laugh similarly. We have never said the other should not exist. So where is the problem? Exactly. Let's be specific. Who and where and what is the problem exactly? You have to know before you can fix it. You know, the daughter of the most famous rabbi who ever was in San Antonio has addressed me for years in all of her messages, "Dear unchosen Semite." And I think that's really funny. I mean, I don't take offense. And one time I was in Jerusalem at a poetry conference with people from all over the world, and it was one of those embarrassing times where you walk out into the street still wearing your name tag, and then you find out about it later and you feel silly. But I was so happy later that I had, because suddenly at a corner, this voice spoke to me, a very resonant, beautiful voice. And he said, "Oh, it's you. Well, you need to come over to my house right now and have some scrambled eggs." And it was Yehuda Amichai, the great Israeli poet. The greatest Israeli poet. I think most Israelis would say he was the greatest poet they ever had. He was taken to Israel as a 6-year-old from Poland. And so this was a poem I wrote for him after the breakfast. And also it was a really good thing he gave me 2 of his books in Hebrew, signed in Hebrew, because they were the only way that I got out of the Tel Aviv airport snafu later. Because when they saw those books, they said, well, you could go. Double peace for Yehuda Amichai. And he wrote many poems in which he had this image. I'm not looking for peace just for Jewish people. I'm looking for peace for all these people who claim this as their home. Not for him and his people alone, but for all who loved that rocky land. Everybody, everybody, sing it. No chosen and unchosen, but everybody chosen. Sing it. All families living under tiled rooftops or flat roofs with strung clotheslines, T-shirts, bed sheets, flags of surrender. I show you my cloth. I live the way you live. All the cousins, second cousins, extra cousins, unknown cousins. No choice, everyone a cousin. Peace better than hurtful moves. Better, better, sing it. Not rain that fell on a few houses only. Not sun that shone on a few favored yards. Not air in small containers only for some lungs. Double peace multiplied. Outside, inside, every ancient space, every sleek new room with tall windows. Peace for sheep and goats grazing in meadows. They already have it. Peace for buckets waiting on doorsteps. Peace for brown eggs lined on counters waiting to be cracked. Peace in skillets and spatulas. We met at a corner, went to his home for breakfast, stared out his window together. The shining city, the sorrowing city. He said, I would never have taken your father's home. I could never have lived in a stolen Arab home. The great voice of the Jewish people said this to my face, our conversation where streets converged. Thanks. So I think whatever we're writing about or caring about, I have a poem here for Jamila Bolden of Ferguson, Missouri, my first neighborhood, who was shot through a window, random gun violence in beloved old Ferguson. I've been to the Michael Brown Monument with my childhood friends. You know, wherever we are struggling with these issues of violence and trouble and trauma, we have to find some ways, some things that we can come together through. Scrambled eggs are one. The moon is one. In Japan once, I heard a beloved Japanese poet tell a bunch of high school kids, no one should write about the moon anymore. The moon is very, very overused. I thought, but they haven't written about it yet. Give them a break. Let them write about it. So I went back to my hotel room and was so brazen I started writing for the moon, in the voice of the moon. Not only about the moon, becoming the moon. And at that time, sad things were happening in Gaza too. So this is called Moon Over Gaza. I should have written Moon Over Yokohama, but Moon Over Gaza speaking. I am lonely for my friends. They liked me, trusted my coming. I think they looked up at me more than other people do. I, who have been staring down so long, see no reason for the sorrows humans make. I dislike the scuffle of bombs blasting very much. It blocks my view. A landscape of grieving feels different afterwards. Different sheen from a simple desert, rubble of walls, silent children who once said my name like a prayer. Sometimes I am bigger than a golden plate, a giant coin, and everyone gasps. Maybe it is wrong that I am so calm. And you're very, very sweet and kind audience. I feel your power in your listening. Thank you. I'll just read a few more here. This poem was written after speaking to a 17-year-old Syrian boy in London who had crossed the Mediterranean on a raft and spent a few months in a camp in France. and then sort of been taken in as kind of a foster son by a British lawyer. And they were working very hard to find his parents. And when I asked him, what do you hope for most right now? And he just said, to hear my mother's voice. Mediterranean blue. If you are the child of a refugee, you do not sleep easily when they are crossing the sea on small rafts and you know they can't swim. My father couldn't swim either. He swam through sorrow, though, and made it to the other side on a ship, pitching his old clothes overboard at landing, then tried to be happy, make a new life. But something inside him was always paddling home, clinging to anything that floated, a story, a food, or face. They are the bravest people on earth right now. Don't dare look down on them. Each mind a universe swirling as many details as yours. As much love for a humble place. Now the shirt is torn, the sea too wide for comfort, and nowhere to receive a letter for a very long time. And if we can reach out a hand, we better. I was telling Scott that I'm turning in a new book on Monday, and I've been working on it for a little while here, and you always feel a little anxious in the final days, but I thought I should, because I knew you'd be really nice, read at least 2 poems that I've never read in my life that I'm getting ready to turn in the new book. So it started out as poems for moms, and now it's kind of more become poems for families, and how it's all connected. Legacy. My whole life would not have happened without a man whose name I do not know, who died in snow. He was young, had been married only 3 months to my mama's best friend. Walking on a wintry path in Kansas, he toppled into a snowbank, dead. That's it, all the information. When he died so suddenly, my mama moved to the town where his young bride lived to console her for a few months as she got over the shock. Her friend had a job, so my future mama got a temporary job selling sewing machines and a volunteer job in a hospital where she met my dad, who had just landed from the other side of the world. See? The snowbank. The poor, frozen man. I owe him everything. And I really did make an attempt to find him, because I know his wife's name, but it's pre-internet and he's not showing up. And then just, hopefully, this is a book for young writers, young readers. So hopefully, it'll inspire kids, like, what's some odd thing about how your parents met? That's what I always think of as poems. One poem, like A Happy Contagion. You read that person's poem, but then you write your own poem. And I love when kids write about their names. That's one of the most interesting first subjects anyone can take on. Or their nicknames, or what they wish was their name. You can just never go wrong. I mean, they'll write something interesting. This is called My Mom, Miriam Naomi. Her first name meant bitter. How could anyone enjoy a name like that? It's biblical, her parents said, but she never liked it. Later, she passed on her middle name to me. Naomi, also biblical, means pleasant, used against me when I was a grouch. Good luck, it was also my father's dead sister's name, so it belonged to both of them. But did it belong to me? At 12, I discovered Naomi backwards was I moan. This helped everybody. You're so sweet. Okay, just 2 more. Is that okay, Scott? 2 more. Thank you. Yes, we need a little humor here. At least one person here has the Tiny Journalist. Thank you, Joe, for having this book. And the Tiny Journalist is dedicated to all kids who have to be advocates for justice because the grown-ups didn't quite do the job. So the kids come along and they have to start over or start at zero or be advocates. So it's dedicated to all the kids in the West Bank especially, but also in Gaza who've been advocates. But the shortest poem in the book is one that I've thought about all my life because of having lived there and having experienced some of the things that they experienced. This is just called No Explosions. To enjoy fireworks, you would have to have lived a different kind of life. And I'll just read the poem somebody asked me to read. That this is the oldest poem I ever read anywhere, and it was written on my honeymoon, but I didn't feel as if I wrote it. I felt as if it was channeled through me and spoken by a helpful voice in the air. You want to say angel? Fine. Spirit, muse, kind presence in the atmosphere, and I just wrote it down. And my husband and I had been married just a few days, and we went off to South America with a very naive intention for our honeymoon. We wanted to travel from the top of South America to the very bottom. So foolish. It's so far. And we were robbed during our very first week of every single thing we had, including our passports. And if you ever want to have a sobering experience, try being robbed of everything before the existence of the internet and not having one coin, one identifying nothing. We had nothing. But we were still alive. And someone else who had been with us on the same bus was not. And so this poem was spoken through the air to me as I was very, very shaken up, very stressed out. And I'm proud that it's gone on. I'm happy that it's gone on to have its own life. I don't feel like I wrote it. I just feel like I wrote it down. I'm happy that Emma Thompson and Jeremy Irons read it on the internet. It's really amazing to hear one of your poems in the mouth of a famous actor whom you've loved in a movie. It's kind of crazy. So I've always told kids, let your poems go out. Share them with the world. People need your voice. Your family needs your voice. Your neighbor needs your voice. But who knows who else needs your voice? Maybe some person you never met needs your voice. And it touches me that other people have said they needed this, so it's always been theirs. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved. This must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you. He too was someone who journeyed through that night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Scott. Thank you. This is so nice. Even your chairs are nice. They're comfy
And water.
and water. And my husband was right. This is the friendliest auditorium. So those of you who went to school here, seminary here, bravo on your good choices in life.
Naomi, thank you so much for your talk, for your readings. I'm still thinking about scrambled eggs. I'm thinking about the moon. I'm thinking about, as an ethicist, I need to pay close attention to small verbs. So I'm taking a lie. Thank
I'll give you
you.
that poem if you want.
Oh, yeah. I'll have my classes read it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So we're going to have some Q&A time. We'll have a little bit of conversation, and then we're going to open it up to everyone. So be thinking about what questions you might like to ask here in a minute or so. So you talked a lot about working with children and learning from children. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what you've learned from working with children that can speak to this current moment for us. What are, and you've sort of alluded to some of this in the poems that you read, but what are the things that children can teach us right now when grown-ups aren't doing so well?
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for that question. You know, wonderment and curiosity. Oh, I'm sorry. Testing, yes. Wonderment and curiosity. And, just ways of getting along. Probably we all have memories of how we were trained in elementary school to get along when someone bullied us or when someone wasn't nice to us. I mean, we learned tactics. Like, one thing my father used to say when anyone would say something that was unfriendly to him, he would always say, "My friend," and that sort of disarmed them. I think you need a little more information. And then there was kind of a curiosity, like, well, what's he referring to? Or what does he think I don't know? But he wasn't assaulting them or saying, "You're wrong." I had lunch with my second grade grandson today, and I saw a most beautiful thing. A little boy I've never seen came dashing up to him and just put his hands on both his shoulders, and he said, "We'll see each other later, right?" And my grandson said, "Yeah, I'll see you on the playground," and just had the biggest smile. And I thought, this is fantastic. I said, "Is this a new friend?" He said, "Yes, and we're not even in the same class. We only met outdoors." And I thought, that's so beautiful. I mean, children know how to make a new friend outdoors. What is wrong with us? Where is dialogue? We have people in power in many countries who just want to, like, promenade or make pronouncements. But kids are already learning how to make friends outdoors and ask questions. And, and the questions that kids ask are so pure. You know, they're not like a question that's going to make them the greatest person in the whole writing class. Their questions are like, well, would it be okay to talk about my cat? Could I use my cat as a character? You said to write about our families, but my cat feels like my family. So, they're not questions of domination. I don't think I've ever worked with kids or people in jail or detention or hospitals or mental health facilities, all places I've worked repeatedly. I don't think I've ever worked with anyone who was interested in domination or wanting to be better than someone else. It's always been an exploration. And I think that's one of the problems in our world and why we need to listen to kids' voices. And, the wise people will post things on the internet that is like, well, I asked my third grade next door neighbor, what does the world need? And it's always something beautiful. It's always something endearing and full of care or affection. So I think right now, what I wonder is if all the projects, say in a region like Gaza and Israel, if all the projects that have devoted themselves to togetherness, what is happening to them right now? Are they being shut down? Are they able to speak? I mean, I feel like the CNN and MSNBC anchors should be going and talking to them. They haven't been on a single newscast, any of these people. Many people don't even know they exist unless you have a particular interest in the region. And I think that's really regrettable. It seems like it would be a time to say, where are the people with the skills and strategies to get over dysfunction? Well, let's talk to those people. Let's talk to the doctors on both sides who, yes, treat one another's patients. There's an important model. Sorry for talking too long. I'll give short answers to the rest of the questions.
That was not too long.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So children have some things to teach us. Poetry has some things to teach us. And I love the way that you talked about poetry this evening and in our other conversation about poetry having a kind of agency, right? Poems want to do things.
Right.
And you said when we were talking, poetry wants to help us.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, how can poetry help us bridge these divides?
Well, I think, many of you here are in professions or places where you have a chance to share with other people, to be in community regularly. And that's a gift to have. I mean, teachers have that gift every day with their students, but to be in a position where you can share words of your choice. And I always feel that poems call us to attention. They just clarify whatever the poem is looking at. They slow us down. They help us focus. They don't make us feel like we have to know everything, but we might know one thing, and we might know it well in that poem, working on the poem. And, I've never met anyone who says they read poems and feel worse, unless it was a kid in a high school getting ready to be tested. And the problem with those tests is the tests ask, what does this poem really mean? As the great Charles Simic used to say, why do we have to paraphrase a poem in duller language? Why can't we just ask, what is this poem showing me? Or where is this poem trying to take me? Or what do I like in this poem? Maybe I like two words, the way they sit together. Or what does this poem remind me of in my own life? That's the way poetry should always have been taught. Not, what is this poem really trying to tell you, like it's a coded language. And I promise, anytime I've been served with one of those tests on one of my own poems, I would have flunked it. So on my own poem, I couldn't answer those test questions. They're not reasonable. They don't even make sense, and they never focus on the right thing. So, I think a poem wants to give us our lives back, too. When you read a poem that you really, really like, you make a copy of it or keep it near you or put it in your file of savor things so that you can find it when you need it. Because it will want to come to you at another time when you really need it. It will serve you. Poems you love and read repeatedly. The way that poetry asks us to pay attention feels really important in your poems, and also I'm thinking of Cynthia's comments in introducing you and the connection to sacramentality and, yes.
and a sort of sacramental attention to small things or ordinary
Right.
things like water and bread.
Right.
And that your poems invite us to pay that kind of attention.
And how prayer invokes. Prayer witnesses, but also asks and listens. And I think a poem often does that too. And I think of sacramental contemplation as this long, loving look at something or another. And that's what poetry is, a long, loving look. I mean, we don't write about things we don't care about or that we dislike intensely unless we can try to find a way into the thing we dislike to sort of understand it better. Because if you had told me when I was a little child that I was going to write a lot of poems relating to war, I would have thought, that's ridiculous. I hate war. I hate even hearing about any war that ever was. I'm not going to write about that. But look at the world we've lived in. They've never ended, the wars. And so there have always been things to think about and talk about, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's open up for some questions from the audience. Anybody have a question? And maybe I'm going to be the one carrying this microphone around.
Oh, poor you.
I'm looking for the
Scott.
person who's going to carry this microphone around. I think it's me.
It's good. You're so nice. Double
yeah.
duty.
So who would like to?
And there
start?
is no silly question. Don't be shy to ask any question. Yes.
When you talk to children or inmates or different groups, how do you define poetry for them, as distinguished from other ways of communicating? And is it a different definition depending on who you talk to?
Definitely a different definition depending on who you talk to. I often describe it very simply as that vertically arranged language that has space around it. And there are all kinds of forms. Many of you grew up knowing songs. Well, if you write the words of the song down, or like a nursery rhyme, that's like the language of a poem. A prayer can be like a poem. If you see it on the page, often it's written in a more vertical shape. A kind of writing that is often filled with images or happy focusing on just one thing. It doesn't have to tell you a long, long, long story from A to Z. It could just hop into H and just focus on H. And, there are so many different kinds of poems that I often try to, like a group that you're going to see not too many times, you just have time to talk about a few of them. So I might show them like a long list poem by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and then compare it to a haiku or a very short poem, and just say, all these different kinds of poems. Poem where the words are scattered all over the page. Now they have these magical things in classrooms that they never had before, where I can stick any page under there and it goes on the wall. So that's made it easier. So you don't have to have like handouts and copy the poems on the board and everything. But just talking about, we write in different shapes, and this is a shape. Poetry is a shape that gives a lot of honor to breath and to space. And when you come down to the next line, it's often a place that you might want to take a little breath or just pause for a little second. And I think kids are often relieved, or even adults too, that they don't have to fill up the whole paper. That there's something kind of refreshing about the space. That's how I felt. When I was a child and first saw Emily Dickinson's poems on the page, before I could even read, I didn't even know what they were called, but I said, that's what I want to do. That thing, that. Because I loved how they floated there on the page, like a little tag on a present. Thank you for that question. There's one. Maybe you have a loud enough voice.
Just following on what you were saying, can you the experience of what it was like for you when you wrote your first poem?
When I wrote my first poem, oh, sure I could. Well, I was, I just have to preface this with, I have just had a reuniting with my best friend from first and second grade, and we never saw each other in all these years. And we never talked, and we never shared a letter, nothing. But she found me. And so she is confirming that our first grade was really rough. It was a very tough space. And our teacher wrote home to my parents that I carried the devil within me on my first report card. Imagine. I was what, 6 years old. I carried the devil. I said, what does that even mean? The teacher wrote on her first report card, and I just only found this out within the last month. This child thinks she is a queen bee. So now, our emails back and forth, which are like 3 a day now because we have a lot of time to catch up on, are like, dear queen bee from the devil. Anyway, she confirms it was a really tough class, and the teacher was really mean to everyone, but especially to the girls for some reason. And I wrote my first poem in that class, but not because of anything that happened in class. It was because my mother read me poems before I went to sleep at night. And we went on a trip on a train to Chicago. I'd never been on a train, never been to Chicago. It was so exciting. I wanted to do something about it, so I wrote a poem, little tiny 4-line poem. And I brought it back to my first grade teacher as a kind of peace offering. And I copied it out on a paper, and she looked at it, and she didn't say anything but, "You can hang it in the hall." So we had a big community bulletin board where you could stick up a picture of your birthday party. So I stuck it up, and I remember just a momentary feeling of pride because it was the first thing I had ever put on the bulletin board. And a week later, an older girl, maybe 3rd grade, came up to me in the hall as we were all filing out to lunch and said, "Did you write that Chicago poem?" And I said, "Yes, I did." I felt so proud that I was able to spell Chicago. And she said, "I went there too. I know what you mean." And that was the moment. That was the lightning strike moment for me as a poet when I said, I want to keep doing it. She knows what I mean, and I don't even know who she is. So that was a beautiful moment. And then I went into 2nd grade to an amazing teacher. So it's really wonderful to have my old friend to talk about this teacher with, because we both loved her so much. She was the oldest teacher in the St. Louis public schools at that time. And now it seems like she wasn't that old, because I'm only 4 years younger than she was. But she loved poetry more than anything. And she felt like poetry was what children needed to memorize, read, write, learn our vocabulary words from, learn our science from. You know, like we would learn about butterflies through butterfly poems and things. And so she had us writing constantly. And that year confirmed it for me. And that was the year I started, not because of her, but the school librarian said, well, you could send your poems to children's magazines. That's how people get published, you know, you send your work out. And she said, but you might have to send out 20 before one ever gets accepted. And I said, it's okay, I have 28. So I started. That's how I started. And I did not go to a writing program, although I taught at this famous writing program right over the hill here, the Michener Center for Writers, for 28 years. I did work for them, and so I commuted up from San Antonio. But I did not go to a writing program myself. I was a religion major.
Perhaps one last question. Yeah, please.
Hi. Hi.
I'm really struck by the sentence about the homework that's lost, and the boy that says
Oh,
that
yeah.
I wish I had problems
I could solve.
I could solve.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just wondering, in these days,
Yeah.
this month, that
This
has
month.
felt like a lot, to say the least, what would you say are some of the problems you think you can solve?
You can solve?
Yeah, in the day. Like, what would you say? are some
Well,
of the problems you
that's a
solve?
great question. So question, what are, in these days of so many unsolvable problems, because, you know, the leaders of countries aren't looking for us to see what we're saying tonight. What are some problems we can solve? We can keep loving one another. We can keep communicating with any friends who the world might see as our others. That's why it's been so important to me this month to be communicating with all my Jewish friends. My Arab friends are in high trauma, but we're all communicating. To keep working on the little things that we can invoke in community wherever we are. You know, I feel like if people expressed, they would be less likely to resort to violence. Men in the maximum security prison in the state of New York said to me, if we had had confidence in our language, we would never have been in here. Isn't that a haunting line? And a woman I worked for, she just died within the past year. She was a great Palestinian scholar. She died at 98. Her name was Dr. Selma Hadra Jayusi. When my father was in high school, her poems were already in textbooks. She was a very renowned young Palestinian poet and scholar, and very strong activist for women always. And she used to say, if we read one another, if we listen to one another, we'd be less likely to kill one another. So pay attention, read more, listen to the voices that are out there singing. I've been listening to a lot of blues and gospel music this month because I'm just so sad all the time. I feel, that we need to work with anyone who's within our reach to speak up for the humanity of all people, all humans everywhere, and that the vast majority of human beings do not want to commit acts of violence against one another. And also in the case of Gaza and Palestine, that poem, Before You Can solve it, you really need to know what happened here. You really need to know what's been going on for 72 years. Because it is not 1 month old, this problem. So, all the Gaza poems I read you are old poems from other times in Gaza. So, I think we need to be always looking for that more information, always reminding one another of humanity. There's someone I have a lunch date with, kind of vague in December, who just posted the most racist thing against Arabs on Facebook that I have ever read in my life. It's from somebody I'm supposed to have a lunch date with. I mean, an educated person. And I'm thinking, do I go or do I not go? It really hurt my feelings to read that someone smart could say that. But I feel like I have to go to just talk to her and say, well, how could you say that about millions of people? So I think we have to keep doing things that feel a little uncomfortable sometimes, awkward, hard, standing up and mentioning it. So because there are so many voices we're never going to hear, and so many friends we're not going to have a chance to make, we need to really spend time encouraging the voices we can reach and make the friends we can make. So thank you for you. I can tell you do it all the time. You shine. Thank you. Thank you all for being truly one of the most loving and gentle and generous audiences I've ever met. So
Well, thank you, Naomi. You've given us words that help us hope, and we need that right now. Thank you so much. It's been a gift.
thank you for all your work. Thank you.